Good afternoon. My name is Doug LEIN. I'm with the City of Auburn Office of Economic Development. I want to welcome you to another one of our series of business assistance programs entitled Loss Prevention Workshop. I believe we have a great lineup of experts today to present a wealth of information and up-to-date information for you and your company. Theft is an ongoing problem for companies, large and small. As owners and managers, you need to always be on your guard. Our speakers will touch on a number of similar topics. This is important because we want them to share their take on the issues. I want to thank the City of Auburn, Mayor Nancy Backus, and City Council for their ongoing support of this effort, and the Auburn Area Chamber of Commerce and the Auburn Downtown Association. Our first speaker is going to be Mr. Greg FLESER, General Manager of the Outlet Collection here in Auburn. He has served as General Manager of the Outlet Collection since 2009 to present. Greg?
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak today. One of the first slides that I'll put up there, my wife would love to see some of my favorite selections of the retailers are up there that we have at the center, and some of my wife's are as well, hers particularly at the top left. But I think the point of what I'd like to make on this slide is, over the years I've been blessed with the opportunity to work with a large gamut of big and small retailers, some national, some local, some regional, different concepts, different brand types, different products, different customer profiles, all of which have unique and interesting and diverse challenges as it relates to loss prevention. Loss prevention, in my mind, before I get into the nuts and bolts of my speaking opportunity, is a misnomer. You can't prevent everything, in my opinion, but there are a lot of things you can do to counter that and reduce those losses. To that end, through those years and working at many different properties throughout the country in different mall environments, I have noticed some commonalities between a lot of those merchants, a lot of those business types, despite the fact that they have such differing product styles. And those commonalities are what I chose to focus on today. I think they personally can be applied by any business model, whether it be brick and mortar or even internet-based. So without further ado, moving on to the next slide. The first commonality that I've noticed in my experience is that each one of those merchants, regardless of size, shape, or business model, spend a lot of time focusing on the sources of loss. What's causing that loss? And you'll notice a couple of repeat items on there. And if you were to do this research and spend some time Googling, you'll find different percentages depending on the source of where you look. What you'll notice a trend in being is that the word error is one of those last three. Error is a big part of loss that a lot of folks forget to look at and spend some time concentrating on. It's not necessarily all criminal. You can't make that presumption. Another thing that a lot of business owners will fail to recognize immediately is you hire persons you trust. You spend time with them and you work with those staff members and employees, and you find it difficult to believe that you need to spend a great deal of time looking at internal theft, employee theft. That's a critical component, as you can see on this particular source. Nearly 50% of that loss is attributable to internal employee theft. Not the error kind, but the criminal kind. So that's something to definitely make sure that you're bearing in mind. Moving on to the next slide, the second commonality that I wanted to touch base on is methods. All retailers will spend some amount of time looking at the methods, and I think that's what gets the most attention, if you will, in their evaluation. How can you counter, and what are you countering? It's very wise to spend a great deal of time, and that varies dramatically depending on, if you're selling T-shirts and shoes, or if you're selling handbags, or if you're selling jewelry, if you're selling a non-tangible product, maybe it's data or software or something that can be downloaded from the internet even. There are a multitude of means, and they are nearly countless. You should focus a lot of time on the things that are most common within your environment, but you need to spend a great deal of time talking about those. You'll notice that throughout my presentation, I'm not spending much time on what you should be doing specifically, just topics. I'm not here to tell you what to do. In fact, I've been told to carefully avoid giving what could be construed as legal advice, but I will give you sound business practical advice so that you can make those determinations on your own. I think that's important to do. One of the most common questions I'm asked in my profession, and that even leading up to this presentation was asked, is, what are some of the most common types of thefts? And it's hard to pin down. I find when I'm asked that question, shoplifting is a shoplifting in my book, But it could be you see one of the examples at the bottom right of the slide is a grab and run. That's probably one of the more common styles that you hear about. But the most classic, tried and true that have been around for decades and decades and will continue to be is simply taking an item and concealing it and leaving the business. There are a lot of ways you can stop this, and that's kind of what I want to move on to the next slide and talk about in commonalities, is now that you've identified the sources of those loss and the methods that are used to create those loss by others, you should build practices, policies, procedures, checks and balances to ensure that you are protecting yourself from those losses as best possible. Those are as countless in their diversity as are the sources and methods. But many of them can be employed regardless of the model of your business. I will say that there's maybe twofold, I would say, in any one of these practices is that dual control, I want to call attention to, is just about everything on these lists, things that you can employ in your policies are considered, in my opinion, to be dual control. Whether it's a video system, you've got a live person that's interacting with the customer, and you've got a video system acting as dual control. Did it happen the way you were set, the way it was told to you? Did that transaction occur? You can implement dual control with two persons. You can do it with paperwork. You can do it with a third party, and you should. You should do it in as many of those ways as are cost effective and efficient for your business model. But if you're not looking at dual control practices, I think you're missing a great opportunity and a simple one to build in. It should be a matter of routine for things of cash nature and handling and checkouts at the end of a day or between shifts, between persons. It should be that two separate persons are looking at those things. It should be that you have maybe a video system that can help to, with time-stamped information, verify that a transaction occurred in the way that it did. If you're receiving shipments, it can stop from the non-criminal style of errors that I referred to early in the presentation. Video can help with that. When you're doing it under dual control, error is less likely, and it narrows the field down to things that might be more deliberate. So I'm a huge fan, if you can't tell, about dual control. Your first line of defense when you're looking at these things, and dual control is one of those, is deterrence. Deterrence is the real key. In the mall business, that's what I focus on with our security staff in a very large way. Be visible, be proactive. The video systems, we're not necessarily very interested in hiding the fact that we have them. We don't want them in the face of the customer to offend or distract from the business objective, but we're not looking or interested in concealing the fact that we're watching, that we're looking. You have to balance that, and it's difficult in some cases to do, but deterrence is the key. And you can do that by having routines that an internal employee can expect. If they expect that there's a dual control in place and that it's been a well-established routine, they're less likely to choose to do the wrong thing. So deterrence is a huge factor in that. And you'll hear me say this a couple times, and maybe from other speakers as well. I mentioned that loss prevention, I feel that it's a misnomer. You can't prevent it. Your last line of defense is prosecution. In my humble opinion, and I think you'll hear that from others too, prosecution is key. I've heard from many industry experts in other fields and legal prosecutors and things of that nature that if you have 100 crimes that have been committed in a certain demographic or time frame or business model, chances are it's not 100 separate criminals that have committed those crimes. So if you are prosecuting as a regular basis when appropriate, I'm a huge fan of that because that helps as a level of deterrence as well. That crime may be less likely to be committed in the future the further that we choose to prosecute. If you are choosing not to prosecute because it's difficult for your time and you can't afford to follow through, sometimes it takes some effort. Occasionally you'll have to make a court appearance if you're doing those things. But if you're doing things right and you're following procedures and policies and you've chosen wisely how to do that, I think you'll find that it's far more valuable to you to choose to follow that line than it is to not. You'll also be supporting what I truly believe in a mall environment, and it's true of a city and a region as well, acting as one unit, looking out for your neighbor. What we do in the mall world is very important. All the stores and merchants that choose to be a part of a mall are there for a reason because they can mutually benefit from each other in more ways than one, loss prevention being one of those. So if a criminal element comes into the mall, commits a crime, and is captured, and we choose not to prosecute, we're doing our neighbors some harm, and we should view it that way, not just in protection of our own business. So moving on to the next slide. You'll see some additional examples on this slide for things that could constitute as well dual control or prevention tactics and methods that you can employ, policies and procedures. But I think that the fourth item that I've noticed that is very common amongst all merchant styles of businesses is you want to be very careful not to trade in your practices and procedures the liability that you're trying to avoid in loss for a liability you could be incurring from a legal standpoint, from a safety standpoint, or even defeating the purpose of what you are in business to do to begin with. In other words, I think the first and foremost, the simplest thing you do, everybody talks about customer service and providing high quality customer service. That's a loss prevention tactic as well. You're killing two birds with one stone. You provide somebody with that quality customer service and you're doing a great thing. But when you're choosing how you go further into the more aggressive front, you need to think carefully. And I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but if you're deciding whether you would pursue a shoplifter or somebody who's causing loss, or whether you would detain, how you do that, when you make those decisions, be very careful and cautious. Make sure you're providing proper training to your staff and to your team members. If you're choosing to do those things, understand that you could be incurring some additional risk of liability, which could be far greater than the product or item that you may be causing or trying to deter from loss to begin with. Safety is another one of those items as well. I'm a huge passion believer. I don't think anybody in this room or anybody watching this video would disagree that safety has got to be paramount above all else. I know not of any product or piece of merchandise or software, whatever it might be, that is worth a person becoming injured or, God forbid, killed in the result of pursuing somebody that you don't know. You don't know how desperate that person may be, and so you should think very carefully about how you do those things. And if you are choosing to do them, training and consultation, advanced thought, how you're going about that is absolutely paramount. Perception, I think, is another thing that you need to consider in your business model. You don't want to trade one liability for another, and I don't just mean the legal kind, but you could be causing customers to choose to do business elsewhere if you are creating a perception in some of your loss prevention policies and procedures. If they walk into a store, I mentioned, it's pretty common practice. You'll see at a lot of retailers to have door greeters these days. We've all walked into a store, and the first thing you see is somebody who's greeting you with a smile. That's great customer service, for one. It's also a deterrence for loss prevention. But if you pass by 6 people with the name tag bouncer on their sleeve, you're probably going to scare away a few customers and give them a perception which may or may not be true. You have to bear that in mind as well. At the mall property, we always look at perception and what do our staff look like? What do they appear? I mentioned visual deterrence is important. What kind of message are we conveying? Are they dressed in proper uniform? Are they attentive to their duties? One of the practices I'm not ashamed to share with you, I try not to get too much into detail about what we do on a daily basis, but general policy, our security officers at the mall properties are not permitted to take lunch breaks in a public area. As a perception rule, that offers the perception that a person is on a break and not attending to their duties while in uniform. It's a tricky thing to watch out for, but perception is very, very important. You could be trading one liability, as I said, for another. Don't forget the reason for which you're in business to begin with when you're building these policies and procedures and practices with your staff. I mentioned that I would say it again. I think it's worthy of saying a second time, but prosecution, in my humble opinion, is one of the most key things that you can do, the most simplistic. You need to make some sound judgments. I'm not talking about the 5-year-old that accidentally took a Snickers bar on the way out of the convenience store, but I am talking about the stories that sometimes might break your heart, but you know not about the honesty, nor, in my opinion, is it a place for a person to be a judgmental of that. Prosecute in every case that you feel it's appropriate, in every case that you can justify. You're not doing the person that committed the crime a favor by not doing that, nor are you doing your neighbor or your own business a favor by not being proactive in that regard. So without further ado, I'll turn back over to Doug. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ty Nguyen. Ty is the branch manager for Key Bank here in Auburn. He's a little under the weather today, so he's brought a very capable, probably better backup person with him that is going to help with this presentation. Ty's been in Auburn for a number of years. He has been in the banking business for 20 years in the finance and banking management field and has been a small business owner in the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'd just like to go through some trends that we're seeing at the bank right now. One of the biggest trends that we see is actually fraud. And there are different types of ways that people are committing fraud. One of the ways is just like trying to alter their checks or what have you. But there's also scams, and there's also phishing, and there's other methods of fraud as well that they're doing around the community as well. I'd like to introduce you to Janice. She's going to go in a little bit more details on the stuff that we're seeing here at the bank.
Hi, I'm Janice RINDFLEISCH. I've been with KeyBank for 25 years. Sorry, props. And I'm a small business relationship manager. Every year, it's funny, I say to myself, well, that's something I probably haven't seen in a long time, and then something new comes up. It's amazing how the crooks are always like 5 steps ahead of us. So kind of going over some of the points of the biggest scams and fraud that we're seeing within the banking and financial industry. Main one is identity theft. Identity theft is someone taking over your credit card, your debit card, coming in and opening accounts under your name or a credit card in your name. I think one of the easiest things that we can do, especially as business owners, that you can do at no cost to you, is just check someone's ID. If they're handing you a debit card, ask for the ID. If they're writing you a check, ask for a piece of ID. It's the easiest thing we can do, and while some people are faking the ID as well, it's at least preventing it and maybe making the crook think about it before they actually step up and process something. As a business owner, you can encrypt any sensitive information that you might be taking, if you're taking credit card information or checks, destroying things properly. These are really easy tasks that we can do. It might be a little cost if you're using a shred company or something like that, but in the long run, not being the Home Depots or things of the world, that are getting things taken from them, helps prevent identity theft for all of us. Ty mentioned phishing. Phishing is not off the dock looking for an actual salmon. This is people looking for information about you. We were talking a little bit, I think young people are the biggest, probably target for phishers. I don't know if that's what we call them, people that are phishing. It's as easy as them looking to your computer to install malicious software. They are looking for, there's cyber criminals now that we're looking at that are using social engineering to convince people to give them information. In my research for this, one thing I found, and it's newer to I'd never heard of it before, card popping. Card popping is people going using social media. We all know there's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and what they're doing is they're going, and this is where I think young people are really susceptible, they're going on and they're asking questions. I found, this is an example, go on to Facebook, they post, hey, anybody out there have an account at KeyBank? I'm looking for a way that I can cash checks. I don't have my own account, so I'm wondering if you'd do it for me. If you let me use your account, I'll give you some money. And so it seems harmless, why not? So all the checks that they're going to hand this person are all fraudulent. So yes, I'm handing you $1,000 because you told me I could keep $500, but the check comes back and now you're out all that money. It's really hard, and kids think that this is just, oh yeah, it's an easy way to make a buck, but you're getting yourself into trouble doing this. So card popping, who knew? It's all these new things that are out there. But typically what it is it's just somebody offering up something for you that's all legitimate supposedly, but it isn't. A lot of the phishing is through email. If you ever get an email from your bank asking you to hit a link and go back to that link and ask for social security number, your account number, banks typically do not do this. Most credit unions, any financial institution, will not send you a link saying, there's fraud, give me some information about your account. That's typically not what we do. So they're usually taking you to a website that looks very similar, but it is not typically the actual institution's site. So be careful of emails. Contact your bank before you hit any links, or ignore them and delete them. Most banks, I know for KeyBank, we have a whole fraud department, and if customers come to us and say, I think that someone sent me a false email, we ask for them to forward them to us so that we can send them off so we know what kind of fraud and phishing scams are out there. The next thing I want to talk about is skimming devices. Skimming devices are just equipment that crooks use on ATM machines. Gas station pumps are popular. And typically what it is it's a fake portal that you'd put your card in, and they're actually taking all the information off your MICR strip on the back of your credit or debit card. You're entering your PIN. Sometimes it's a matter of, at gas stations, a lot of times it is an actual person that is maybe in the parking lot somewhere. You're entering your card in there, and somehow they're able to detect they can watch you put your PIN number in. So a lot of deterrence for that is if you go up to an ATM machine or a gas pump, look at it. Feel around. I know it's odd to sit and touch the machine, but feel it. Is something loose or does it not look quite right? Look at the other gas pumps or look at another ATM machine. Is it looking the same? If it doesn't look the same or you feel just it doesn't feel right, walk away and use a different machine or go somewhere else. As a bank employee, we're required to go out and check our machines daily, but who knows when they pop up. They could be coming in the middle of the day, slapping that thing on there and walking away. So, you kind of have to protect yourself, so just check for those types of things. And another thing is if you're using the gas pump and you have the opportunity to either use your PIN or use it as a credit card, some of the suggestions that I've read up on have said to not use the PIN, to enter it as a debit or a credit transaction where you're just entering a zip code of where you live, your mailing address. That's supposed to help deter some of the potential fraud out there. My favorite, lottery scams. Everybody's winning a lottery that they never entered. Most of our customers, we have grandma scams, we have lottery scams. I've had at least 10 customers in the last 6 months that have all won the Canadian lottery. It's amazing that they win these things. So the first question we always ask is, did you enter a lottery? Most of them have never entered anything. They don't know how the people got the information. The letters they receive, typically they're a letter that's mailed to them. It's got poor spelling. They're usually a publisher's clearinghouse, and it'll have a publisher's clearinghouse information on the letter itself, but down below it'll have a different company. It'll say Chase Bank. It'll have addresses. The fonts are all different within the letter. It's come from Canada. It's just all wrong. So be careful if you hear of people talking, especially in a retail industry, maybe if you're at a grocery store where you do Western Union or MoneyGram type things. I have a lot of people that think that they have won this lottery, and the whole piece to the lottery is that they have to send money to get their money. So usually if you've won the Washington State lottery or something, you don't pay to get your money. They'll take taxes out and things like that. But these people typically want a processing fee. So they'll ask for a couple $1,000s. If you send me that, then I'll send you your millions later. Doesn't work that way. And then the grandma scams are unfortunate, where the elderly get a phone call, their grandchild is in jail in Mexico and needs help. Grandma, send me some money. Don't tell anybody because they'll kill me if you tell somebody. And so grandma comes and gets some money and then tries to Western Union it or wire it to someone in another country, but their grandchild is perfectly fine. So, but it's hard because they've been threatened, or their grandchild has been threatened, and so they really want to send this money. And it's funny because emotions take over, so they don't care that they're losing money. They just know that they got to save Tommy. All right, counterfeit cash. You want to take that and we'll pass it around? I'm going to send around, there's a $20 bill. This is a counterfeit bill. I'm also sending a pen. So one of the easiest deterrents for counterfeit cash is probably the counterfeit pen, so test it out. The counterfeit pen, it uses an iodine in there, and so if it's not on a specific rag paper that is used to make currency, it'll turn a dark color. And it's interesting, so we were kind of talking, feel is pretty much your only way to, a lot of bills, they're really good looking, but feel is important. And again, we're feeling up things, but feeling up the currency is, if you can feel it and kind of feel another piece of paper, if it feels similar to the piece of paper that you're, just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, it's probably not real. It has a different texture to it. All currencies, whether it's a $1 to $100 bill, all of them have a security strip within them. It's embedded in the paper and it runs vertically on the far end of the bill. That one does not have one. That strip, usually like on a 20, it says USA 20 and a small flag, and it's repeated along the strip. That strip is removable. I think it's defacing money, so don't take it out, but you can. There's also threads in a real bill. So if you look at a real piece of currency, within that are usually red, blue, and green threads. Those threads, if you use a pair of tweezers, you can actually pull the threads out. So that's another way to identify a real bill. On that bill, in the lower corner, you can see a 20, and it's kind of on a real bill, it's almost like a hologram where you move it and it'll shimmer, and that one's not very colorful. And then a faint and smaller version of Jack's on a 20, the Jackson's head is hidden within the paper itself. And so when they're photocopying, you can't get those same things. Unfortunately, laser jet printers are really good, and so they can get nice copies of things. But if you are good with the touch and looking at and don't be embarrassed. I mean, some customers might be offended that you think their bill's fake, but I mean, put it up to the light and stare for at those different things. It's important because you don't want to take a loss. And we found, I mean, that's a 20. Most of the things we get are under $100 bills, so they're 20s and 10s. And I don't know if they're practicing or, if that's just an easy bill because people don't think that would be easily counterfeited. The other thing you want to look at is anything pre-1996. 1996 is where we started all the new currencies, so anything older is probably easier for them to counterfeit. And so if somebody's bringing in old currency, might be a red flag, and it might be something that I don't know if it's enough to say I don't want to take it or I won't take anything older, but they might be a little bit easier to target. Oh, and the other thing is if people are bringing in multiple bills, look for duplicate serial numbers. So if they brought you 5 $100 bills, the serial numbers should be all different. Make sure that they're not all exactly 1, 2, 3, 4 going down the line. I think that was all I had. Anything?
Yeah, I also just want to end that, whether it be banking or retail, our main thing is if it doesn't feel right, you have to trust your intuitions. I think that's going to basically help you deter from any type of fraud or loss prevention. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Our next speaker is Commander Mike Harmon. Mike is one of our management commanders at the Auburn Police Department. He's been with the Auburn Police Department since 1992 and has also served in the U.S. Army in command and has background in loss prevention prior to going into public service. So, Commander?
Thank you, Doug. Good afternoon. First, I'm going to start with our police department. We have 108 commissioned officers. I am the investigations commander, and so I have 3 different teams, and the teams that I have are the major crimes team, and that consists of mostly crimes against persons, domestic violence, robbery, murder, those sorts of things. The other teams are a little more interrelated, and that is the vice and narcotics team and the property team. The property team consists of burglary, auto theft, fraud and forgery, and then high-dollar theft items. And the reason why the narcotics team and the property teams are interrelated quite often are because these folks who have drug problems, and they're committing the burglaries, they're stealing the cars, they're going in and they're organizing the shoplifting, that sort of thing. And so those 2 teams work together very closely. Right now, I'm going to list 3 types of criminals that we deal with on the property team side in terms of the fraud and forgery and loss prevention. And those are, we have organized criminals. Those folks are, some of them have come up from California. I have an example to tell you just recently. But they're organized, they're coming in, these are high dollar loss, and I'll get into those a little bit, but they hit, they move. They might be here for a week, maybe 2 weeks, but then they'll move elsewhere. They'll go to another part of the state, or they'll go to another, even Idaho or down to California, and then they're gone, and we suffer large losses because of them. We have street gangs. Now, street gangs are getting a little more sophisticated. They're still into the slug and mug stuff, but they're getting a little more sophisticated in terms of getting into electronic sort of fraud and forgery type things. We have the drug abusers. Now, these are the folks that are addicted to drugs. They will hit you. Maybe they're alone. Maybe they have 1 or 2 people with them. But this is what Greg referred to as those who will just grab and go, jump in a car and off they go. you know, and I know that retail, you have a strategy about where you're going to put your merchandise, but you know, you need to think about those things because they will seek opportunities and then off they go. So let's get into a little bit credit card, you know, some of our trends. Credit card cloning, what is it? You know, essentially cloning is when you put somebody's credit card information on another card, okay? And how it works is essentially those numbers, those credit card numbers are stored someplace in retail stores, in banks, and they're either somebody either hacks in or you have an employee who gathers those numbers and sells them. But those numbers are eventually sold online, and you have folks like, I'll explain in a moment, who go online, they buy those numbers, and then they make their own cards. For example, we had an individual about a month and a half ago. We did a warrant in town here of a motel, and this person purchased hundreds of credit card numbers online, and he listed 3 or 4 different websites where he went and purchased those from somebody he didn't know, but went to the websites because that's where they're posted, and bought hundreds of credit card numbers. He also, in his room, we had him with hundreds of blank credit cards, and he had about 140 embossed credit cards with other numbers on them. So what he would do is he would put his number, his name on the cards, sell them to, or he would sell other cards to other people with their names on them. So he would buy these cards for anywhere from $7 to $50 a card. He would sell them, he would buy them, he would sell them for $50 to $100 a card, and then those folks would put anywhere from $100 to $2,000 on that card, maybe more sometimes. And so it was quite a profit, and that's what cloning is. And this individual had a couple of embossing machines, had laptop computers, had the scanning devices, and we were able to recover all those things. And it's pretty significant. And again, those numbers came from somewhere, so I'll get into in a minute what we can do about securing those things. You know, in terms of your employees, it's important that they recognize what these red flags are. A lot of times what happens is, like I said, this individual had several cards with his name on the card. And so in his pocket, when he goes to make purchases, are, you know, 8 to 10 cards. Well, remember now, the numbers, the credit card numbers that are in that magnetic strip, they are, that account might have been closed. You know, you never know what that number refers to. And so a lot of times what happens is these people, the cards will get declined. And that should be a red flag to your folks, that when a card is declined, yeah, I know sometimes it happens. Sometimes there's an account issue. Sometimes there's a bank problem. I understand that. But oftentimes when a card is declined and then they pull another card out, maybe that one's declined, they pull another card out. And so that should be a red flag to you to investigate a little bit more about who this person is. And I think Janice mentioned that make sure you start IDing these folks, identify them, and that should be a red flag, so make sure you pay attention to that. Also, they'll make multiple purchases with that one card. They might even make a small purchase with the card. It might be a $6 or $7 purchase on that card just to see if the account is good. You know, it's not a huge red flag. If somebody tries to purchase something for $6 or $7, it's not going to be. You're not going to think, oh my gosh, here's a big fraud when it gets declined. But they'll do another card. They'll go to another card and they'll make a small purchase. If that small purchase goes through, then they'll know that the account is good, and they'll go for a couple $100, and then they'll go for $1,500, and it'll just keep going until that card gets declined. So all those should be red flags to you. Small purchases to large purchases and multiple purchases off that card. Janice talked about skimmers, and yeah, you know, we haven't seen many of those anymore, but they're still out there. They're mostly, like you said, at gas stations. They're at ATM machines. Occasionally they're in businesses. I don't know what your business is, if you own the scan machines or if you have them serviced by somebody else. It's been reported to us where you'll have a technician come in to service that scan machine at the point of sale, and they will put the skimmer in there. They're not the official representative for that company. And so just be aware, make sure management is aware of who's coming in, and maybe contact the company if you don't know them. Get some ID off this person. The organized crime folks, some are well organized, some are not so well organized, and so there's that gray area there. You know, we have electronics. We've had some reports of flash mob where there are 7 or 8 people are coming into a store and they're cutting the security electronic cords off, and off they go. If you have 7 or 8 people doing that and they each get 2 or 3 pieces of electronics, you've got a loss. And so be aware of those. They're more organized. But I'm talking about, too, those folks that are really well organized, where they're coming up from California. We had, like I said, a month and a half ago, where we had 3 semi-trucks stolen out of Auburn. And they then took those trucks and they stole some trailers out of Sumner. And they took some other trailers. In total, they took 6 trailers. Those trailers, now they do their intelligence on these and they scope this out. They find the high dollar value items inside these trailers. They mark the trailers, and then the drivers come by and they hook up these trailers and off they go. And we had 6 trailers stolen out of one lot in a 6-minute period. And so they're very fast, they're very efficient, and they're very good at what they do. In that particular loss, this was there's a retail outlet out there that specializes in electronics, and in one case we recovered, there were 2 storage units, one in Tacoma, one in Kent. The smaller one in Tacoma had about 35 flat screen televisions in it and 1,755 laptops in it, among other things, and we recovered those for this retail outlet. The one in Kent had twice that amount, and so the recovery was in the millions, okay, but that wasn't even everything that they took. And so that's how well organized these folks are. We did talk about internal theft a little bit, and you know, it's less frequent, this internal theft, than shoplifting, but as that slide that Greg showed earlier, it does account for, in some cases, 50% of the loss. And so, you know, that's a very big problem for you folks. Now, what I'll say is that we all have to work together. Between the banks, between law enforcement, between retail, between the prosecutor, we all have to work together. We have a very good relationship with the prosecutor's office. We also have a good relationship with you folks in retail. And so it's important for all of us to talk to one another and understand what we each need, okay? And I know that loss prevention and security is a balancing act, because you still have a profit you have to make, and so what do you spend on your security? I can tell you that I think Greg mentioned vetting your employees is so important. If you do your homework on these folks up front, then you'll know who they are, you'll get the right people in there, and you won't suffer the internal losses that some folks are suffering. You know, criminal histories are important, especially if these folks are in sensitive positions. If they have access to money or if they have access to vulnerable merchandise, then it's important to vet these folks. And also educate your folks on these red flags that I mentioned before. If you educate your folks and know what to look for, it'll sure help things out. The video surveillance is so important. The cost of video surveillance is dropping almost every week. It's dropping. You know, we want it everywhere, and it's very important for us to have have access to this pictures or video, because we can flash when we come on scene, whether it's a bank or a business. When we come on scene, and you can get that to us quickly, we can get it out to the cars that are out there patrolling almost in an instant. As I sit in my office and I hear about either an issue at the mall or another issue at another retail store or at a bank where we have a robbery, the detectives, I know what's happening. Detectives are leaving their offices immediately. They leave their offices, and within a few minutes on my desk, I'll have a picture of this individual from inside the bank. And that's because the first detective on scene will get that picture and he'll send it to everybody. And so the officers in the car need that picture right away on their computer so they can be watching for that person. They can watch for the car. You know, all that information is very important for us to get and to get immediately. In terms of, you know, oftentimes when we have credit card cloning, what happens a lot of times is we don't find out if, you know, on these credit cards, we don't find out. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks when we finally get the reports and we're able to do the background on this. And so we might not come to your business or to the bank until a month later. And so it's really important for us to have that information and to make sure that you store that information, those videos, that you have a server that's large enough to maybe have the information stored for about a month on there. You know, and the storage doesn't cost that much anymore, but it's really valuable to us when we come out, and because these folks, I guarantee you, are not peculiar about where they're gonna, what bank they're gonna go to, or what retail store they're gonna go to when they go to rip the place off. Okay, they're gonna bounce around and they're gonna feed their habit, and they're gonna do this everywhere. And so when it comes to prosecuting, it's really important for us. I know this was mentioned before, but it's very important for us that you prosecute everybody. And the reason for this is because they get, first of all, it's a deterrent. Secondly, a prosecution means that they now have a criminal record, and part of vetting these employees is running their criminal history. And if they have a criminal record, you know, I guarantee you, if you have an applicant come in and they have a history of embezzlement, you're probably not going to hire them. And so it's important to prosecute everybody for criminal history reasons and for a deterrent. When we talk about internal theft, you know, I know that there's also a balance between restitution and prosecution. But I can tell you this, the prosecutor is always also interested in getting a restitution order from this person as well. And so if you were, because I know that oftentimes there's a loss of sometimes in the thousands of dollars by an employee, and if you can come to an agreement with that employee and not prosecute for, you know, if you sign this restitution agreement, the problem is that also, it becomes difficult for us because this person is still out there. And by the way, this person will go to the next store and the next store and the next store and keep working until somebody does really prosecute, and then they can't get a job. Okay, so that's why it's important to prosecute. So real quick, are we going to be out there? The shopping season's coming up. The holiday season's right around the corner. And I will tell you that law enforcement, the Auburn Police Department, will be out there. We'll be out there at all the congregations, everywhere people congregate to shop, the mall especially, will be at other stores as well, because we need to send a message. You folks need to educate the customers as well. You know, we want to be out there. Look, I mean, the biggest deterrent really is not have any valuables in the car. That's so important. We'll go to the mall, and you can walk down the aisles at the malls in the parking lots, and you'll see bags of this, bags of other things, and customers will be coming out and loading things up in the cars, and off they drive to someplace else. And so what we want, the message we want them to know is, if you have to keep valuables in the car, put them in the trunk, and put them in the trunk before you arrive at the store. You're going to. That way, they're out of sight. Nobody knows. If you have a club, if you have an alarm on your car, set the alarm. If you have a club, put the club on your steering wheel. You know, yeah, does it mean that they can't defeat the club? No, it doesn't mean that. However, it means it's a message to them that says, you know, this person is security conscious, and so maybe they don't have anything in the car as well. And so at least it's a deterrent. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. At this time, I would like to introduce our last speaker for the afternoon, Mr. Doug Rector. He is owner of Northwest Loss Prevention Business Consultants from Renton, Washington. He is founder of Northwest Loss Prevention Consultants. Doug has over 15 years of retail loss prevention experience. Doug has completed the Private Investigator Certificate Program at the University of Washington and is a licensed State of Washington private investigator. Doug is an active member of the Mystery Shopper Providers Association, currently serving on the board of directors. Doug moved to the Pacific Northwest when he wanted to pursue his career in retail loss prevention and was a reserve police officer with the West LEIN Police Department while living in the Portland, Oregon area. Doug, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to do a short presentation on employee theft. Employee theft has been a major problem with retailers on an ongoing basis. Not only do retailers have to contend with shoplifting, but employee theft tends to be more relevant. One question is, how much does employee theft actually cost businesses? And depending on what studies that you read, it varies. You know, some people think, okay, well, maybe $500 million. That's not really true. $1 billion. Actually, employee theft, depending on what you read, costs businesses between $20 to $50 billion per year, which is pretty significant. One of the things that I have that people object to when I talk about employee theft, especially to small businesses, is it's just a cost of doing business. And it's really not, and I'll get to that in a moment, but there's several types of employee thefts. This is just a small list, but it keeps growing. One is, taking money or merchandise. That's pretty basic. Embezzlement, billing schemes. That's if you have someone that creates fictitious invoices and cuts a check at the business to pay for those invoices. There's no such business. It just goes right into their bank account. There's payroll schemes. Maybe you have a friend that works with you, and your friend doesn't want to come to work that day, so they have you punch in and out on their own time card to make it look like they were actually working when they're not. Expense reimbursement schemes. So if you have an expense account, there's ways to doctor those up to make it look like you have more expenses than you actually do. And then time theft, and that kind of relates also to the payroll schemes, but theft of time. So if you're spending half your time on the internet doing shopping on eBay during your work hours, that's time theft. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And information theft, and that's if you leak out information about your company to the competitors. So those are just some of the types of employee thefts. There are some red light indicators also. If you're a business owner, you might not think you have a problem, but there's certain signs that that could pop up to just keep in the back of your mind that, I got to kind of watch this person. Doesn't mean that they're stealing, but one is employees living beyond their means. So if you have an employee working 20 hours a week at minimum wage and they're driving a brand new Ford Mustang, that's kind of living beyond their means. Now, that's not saying that they're stealing. Maybe their parents bought it for them, but that's one way. Or one of the reasons, or not one of the reasons, but one of the things that you can look out for. Not taking vacations. Employees that are stealing, they generally don't like to take vacations because then they lose control of their work environment. And when they come back from their vacation, they don't know if they're going to be challenged. They don't know if you've looked into their records. So employees that don't want to take a vacation that's another red light indicator that there might be a reason for that. If an employee has garnishments, if they have a garnishment for child support or small claims garnishments or collections, whatever, that's another indication. That usually indicates that there's a cash flow problem. So I'd be watching out for that. If they've got a gambling problem, they might come back to work on Monday and they talk about their night at the casino, and it's like every week that's all they're talking about is their visits to casinos. That's another red light indicator. And if they have drug or alcohol addictions, that's another red light indicator that they might have a problem. And if they're angry with management, if they think that they're working a lot of hours and not getting compensated for it, they've never got a raise, they're not recognized for a job well done, they're just generally angry with management, that's another red light indicator. And complaints about their pay. So just the cost of doing business. You know, every business, they have different profit margin. But let's say, for simplicity's sake, an employee steals $2. Is that just the cost of doing business? If you have a 10% profit margin, you have to actually sell $20 in merchandise just to make up for that loss. And you get that by dividing the profit margin equals to the sales to make up for the lost profit. But there's one common denominator why employees steal, and that's opportunity. If they have the opportunity, they're going to steal. So if you take away those opportunities, you have good policies put in place, then you're going to reduce the chances of employee theft. There's several ways that you can prevent employee theft besides buying a bunch of cameras. One is pre-employment background checks. It's very important to do. And it's also important that when you do background screening that you go with a company that's FCRA compliant. That's the Federal Credit Reporting Act. So you have to make sure that they sign the proper releases and that the background check is relevant to the type of job. So if you're hiring a landscaper, there's really no need to do a credit background check. But if you're going to hire a CFO, then you might want to do a credit background check along with the criminal background checks. Have a loss prevention policy in place, have it reviewed every year, and have your employees sign it. So when they're hired on, they know exactly what the policies are, they understand it, they've signed it, and then go over it once a year during their reviews. Leadership by example. That's really important. If you have a policy that employees have to park in a certain area, make sure that's where your managers park as well. If your employees see the managers parking up front in the customer parking area, then you're not leading by example, and neither will the employees. Create an employee hotline. And we offer the employee hotlines. What that is, it's a hotline. It's also web-based where employees can go if they suspect one of their workers stealing, or not necessarily stealing. It could be anything from sexual harassment issues or whatever. They can go to this hotline, be completely anonymous, and report their concerns, and it goes to management, and then management can do their investigation. And fair pay, the $15 an hour, that's going around right now, but the whole thing is it's fair pay. Employees want to be paid what they're worth, and so if they get good pay benefits, that's going to cut down on employee theft. And employee recognition, have some sort of an employee recognition system in place. And remember, they're your employees, they're not your friends. One of the most difficult things is if you have an employee that's been with you for 10, 15 years, they're almost like family, and then you lose sight of things. So try not to make them your best buddy. You got to always remember that the employees are your employees, not necessarily your friend. And my name's Doug Rector, and this is my information. We also do mystery shopping, and this is my contact information.
Is there any questions that, we've got a couple more minutes here. Is there any questions that anybody in the audience would have for one of our speakers? Yes, ma'am. Just a minute, they're going to have you use the microphone over here.
I would like to know if you could explain to me the process of when you believe you've got someone shoplifting, what can you do and what can't you do? Do you understand what I'm asking? Like, I mean, I know I can't grab them and hold them there, but like, for instance, I have a boutique here in town, and I have people who come in who I know have shoplifted, and I'm like, I know I saw you take something, you need to give it back. And they just leave. I mean, how do I deal with that?
Well, first I'll say, as Greg mentioned earlier, safety is paramount. Your safety, there's no value you can put to that. And so, but I will say that, this depends too on a lot of, a boutique, it might be different than a large store where they have security and their function is to catch these criminals. But yeah, you have a right to protect your property, and you have a right to detain them until we get there, okay? But again, safety is paramount. And so, yeah, you have a right to protect your property and to hold on to them until we get there. The problem is, depending on the time of day and, might we be 10 minutes or might we be 45 minutes? And so as long as you keep that in mind. Now, if you recover your loss, maybe that's good enough for you. Some stores, they want a bigger deterrent where they're prosecuting everybody.
So if the person steals and leaves, then I shouldn't call 911 because I don't have them.
No, my answer to that would be call us. Call us regardless, simply because we want to know when crimes happen, okay? We at least want that document. We want to know because we do statistical analysis on all crimes in Auburn, and so we want to know when somebody steals something from you, whether you catch the person or recover the property back. We want to know when this happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am a loss prevention supervisor. I actually work in the outlet collection for Burlington. And one of the things I've noticed that we've seen a lot is this return fraud, where we have customers that actually come in our store, load up carts, come to the counter, and return the items that they've picked up off the floor. What is your advice on deterring this kind of, because we're seeing it a lot. I probably on the weekends, like at least 4 or 5. And some of them I have gotten with we have 2 police officers at the super mall who I adore. And we have prosecuted after the fact because once we scan their IDs, they're in our system. Mm-hmm. But how could we deter this from continuing? Because it seems like an everyday thing.
Well, I think first you have to go to your policies on this, and so certainly you would have policies on what you can and can't do. And Greg, flashed a slide there that had some pretty good advice up there. Customer service is fantastic. When they're coming in, if you're addressing them quickly or paying close attention to them, maybe that's, maybe they'll go someplace else, because let's face it, these folks, they're looking for a target-rich environment. They're looking for easy targets. And so if you're constantly paying attention to them, then maybe they'll go someplace else. But you're not going to catch everybody. Sometimes they're going to load them up. If you see them, are these the folks that you've seen load up the carts?
When I go back on video, because of course if you're watching on your cameras, because we have the 360 degrees, I can see every inch of my store at all times. They look like normal stuff. Like the people that walk in the door, they're definitely, I don't really watch people. I more or less watch abnormal behavior or just erratic behavior in my store. They look like normal everyday people. They go to the cash register, so nothing looks fishy until your register associates or your POS associates come up to you and say, yeah, this woman's been here like 4 times and she keeps returning the same items from her baby shower she had a week ago. And so it's hard to get them because everything looks normal until they're actually out of the store and they've just returned, you know, $240 in items, and you're like, well.
Well, my advice on that would be, you know, you have to be very careful, you know, ensuring that you have probable cause if you're going to detain them, you know. You have to make sure that they actually committed a crime, okay? And how you do that, whether it's on your surveillance system or in person, I would be very careful and reluctant to detain anybody if you actually don't have visual probable cause of a crime.
Okay.
Thank you. I believe our speakers will stay around for a few minutes afterwards to answer any more questions you have. I want to thank you all for being here. We hope that you found the presentations helpful. Again, I'd just like to thank the mayor and the council for continuing to support this type of programming for our businesses. And if you have any questions, please give me a call. And we have our 2015 series of workshops that will also have already been programmed for all of next year. And if there's any of these programs you're interested in, please attend. Thank you.